Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Friday night. We're here with another fantastic session in collaboration with Text Help, and I'm really pleased to welcome really good guy and a great person in terms of being able to kind of look at things from a different perspective. He was a guest on my podcast not so long ago on My Tech Buddies. Welcome, Patrick.
Hey, Darren. Thank you very much, man. Good to see you again.
Likewise. How you doing? All right?
I'm doing good. Good Friday night here, 9 o'clock. Sliding into the weekend. And what better way to do it than with an hour with the GEG community, eh?
Absolutely right. Okay, well, we'll get started straight away, eh?
No problem. Thanks, man.
Just a message to everybody in the chat. Just do share your Twitter handles, grow your PLN, and don't be afraid to ask questions as we go through. I'll be keeping an eye on those for you, Patrick, and I'll let you know if there's anything that we need to pick up on, okay?
Thanks, Darren. Okay,
brilliant. Let's get started.
And I'd encourage anybody to, as Darren says there, leave messages and questions in the chat, and Darren can feel absolutely free to interrupt me at any point and we'll try and address some questions, because we're doing something a little bit different tonight, and we're going to be talking about Fluency Tutor. So welcome back. If you've been joining us every night this week, I'm very pleased to see you yet again. It's wonderful. We're in night number 5. We have one more to go, and we're going to hit Read and Write, the product that many of you will know and hopefully love, on Monday with Steph, and I think Darren's back with us as well. But tonight we're going to be talking about one of those tools from Text Help that is a little bit probably less known than some of the others, but it's been around for a number of years, works exclusively on the Google platform, and that is a tool called Fluency Shooter. So I'm Patrick, stroke Patty, depending on how long you've known me for. You can call me either of those two things. I'm more than happy with both. And I'm a tech strategist at Text Help. My job, as I've said every night this week, is just to talk about teaching and learning. That's all really I want to do here. So tonight is made up of the usual mix, where we'll be having a look at the rationale behind what the extension, and in this case web app, actually is, and what it's designed to help with when it comes to teaching and learning. We'll look at the sort of the functions, and we'll see how we might be able to apply that. Tonight is about supporting as many students as possible, but as it says on the screen, it's about supporting students and encourage them to read more. And how do we do that in this Fluency Tutor tool? Well, we encourage them to read aloud. So we assign them passages. We give them the ability to create their own passages from anywhere, any type of content. We enable them to do that in any language. And we encourage them to read it out loud, to record it, and submit it right back to you as their teacher. So we'll talk a little bit about that, just as we go through. So again, very welcome, and hope you stay with us for tonight. Just a quick reminder, I've been doing this every night this week. The two products and Google extensions that we were talking about this week quite a lot, Read and Write and Equatio. If you don't already have those, you can get those. They are free for teachers, so they're free for life as long as you register with a teacher email address. Please don't use your Gmail address. I've been pushing that message all week, simply because we can't give it to you. We can only give it to you if you do register with your teacher email address. So you can get Read and Write and Equatio, both of those. And if you were with us last night where we talked about Text Help PDF Reader, that comes as part of Read and Write. So you can get all of these, for free. So just visit text.help/FFT, fill in the form, 24 hours later, you have all the tools. Now, I would say on that the tool we're talking about tonight, Fluency Tutor, is not included within that. However, if you are a Google Innovator or certified Google trainer, watch out at the end of this series, early part of next week, for an email within the community that will come to you for some very special ways that we're going to support the innovators and trainers that are watching tonight. You'll have access to a special web page, and you'll be able to get lots of help and support and products directly there. So watch out for that email next week as soon as we finish this series. So let's think about reading. And you'll have to excuse me, I'll get a drink of water in just a moment. Let's think about reading and think about how we might create some proficient readers. What are the things that go into that? Well, obviously, things like development of vocabulary. Core to that is development of fluency, and that's one of the ways we can start to measure our students, their reading ability. comprehension, their knowledge and their awareness of oral language and their phonological awareness, and of course areas like phonics. So there's lots of things go into building a reader. I don't know if you've seen from here in the UK, we have an agency called EEF, Education Endowment Foundation, and they have this wonderful map of the reading rope. And the reading rope is all the constituent parts of what makes a good reader. And that's a very, very powerful image. Sorry, actually, I wasn't able to share it with you tonight, but I'll share that maybe after tonight. But we know that making a good reader has a lot of constituent parts to it. And these are just some of them. And some of these are what we seek to develop in this extension and web app that we're going to go through. And what we're going to be looking at directly is Fluency Tutor for Google. So this is the core tool we'll be looking at. And I was kind of thinking before tonight, how can we simplify that down? How can we explain in just a few words how Fluency Tutor helps? And Fluency Tutor helps by encouraging students to practice reading aloud. And I just want you to think of it as simple as that when we get to the actual demo. So if we encourage students to practice reading aloud, then we can monitor them in terms of their progression. They can have self-reflection time where they can review their own reading. They can get supports from technology tools that happen to be there within their browser window. So we can also do things like when they're practicing reading aloud, we can check their comprehension of the passage that they've read. So we can give them comprehension questions and we can test on that. So we can test this and measure this in a lot of different ways. But the most important thing we can do is encourage them to read more and to read often. And that's what we're trying to do with Fluency Tutor. We have people who use Fluency Tutor in mainstream classrooms as part of withdrawal groups. They use it at early years. They use it at challenging years for individual needs. They use it across the board because, like read and write, if you've seen it, we don't worry about what the content is. We just provide the help and support to encourage reading off that particular piece of content. So I want to talk about something that I don't talk about very often, which is features. And I do kind of, I shirk a little bit when I think about reading off a bullet point list. But I do think for the background of Fluency Shooter, that it's very important that we understand exactly what the extension and the web app does. There are two parts that I'm going to show you tonight, the extension and the web app. They both do very, very different things. And so I just want to make that distinction as we go. I'll explain those in just a few seconds. But the overview of Fluency Tutor and how it's going to help on the Google platform is it's going to encourage students to record passages of reading. In order to do that, we give, as part of the app, 500 different preloaded passages, and we put the reading levels on those. So you get the Lexile level, you get the word count, you get the accelerated reader level if you're using that reading program. On top of that, we put in comprehension questions for all those 500 passages. But then, in terms of practice reading aloud, we want to be able to say to students, well, actually, we need to encourage you to pick your own content. So we allow students to pick their own content. So they're on a web page. They're reading about the Mars Perseverance rover as an example because it's something they're interested in. Whatever they may well be interested in, current affairs or background story, historic story, whatever they find on the web within their Chrome browser, they can turn that into a practice reading piece. But that also means that you as a teacher can take it. So when we talk tonight, the reason for the bullet points is we're not just confined to the 500 pieces that are leveled. We are unconfined completely because we can take a Google Doc, we can take a web page, and we can turn that into a reading passage, encourage our students to read it. Okay. It's easy to send it to students as well, because you're going to see that we integrate Google Classroom into that. So if you're using Google Classroom, which I hope you all are, you can easily import your rosters. But if you don't use Google Classroom, you can just send pupils a code and you can invite them into your class. There's many ways you can do this. But we try and make it easy from start to finish. And again, it comes back to this point. What are we trying to do? We're trying to build that oral fluency bit by encouraging students to read aloud. So how do you get it? Okay, very simply, there's two parts. There's a web app, and you go to the web app, and it will install this in your app section, and it's fluency.texthelp.com. So you can get started there as a teacher. That's also where your students would go for initial registration. So everything happens within the Chrome browser window just by visiting fluency.texthelp.com. If you're online at the minute, by all means, jump on to fluency.texthelp.com and you can sign in as a teacher with your Google credentials and you will be up and running and you'll have access to all the tools. So you can play along with us tonight as we go through all of the settings here. So fluency.texthelp.com, that's where you're going to go to create content. That's where you're going to go to measure and score content. And that's also where your students are going to go to read back their content. Now, I said there was 2 parts to this. So the only thing you'd need to do to get started tonight is fluency.texthelp.com. But there is an extension as well. Now, this is slightly different, so not to be confused. This is our Share with Fluency Tutor extension. So what I'm going to recommend you do, if you want to get started with Fluency Tutor, go first to fluency.texthelp.com, sign in with your Google ID, and then when you get that process finished, just jump right into Chrome, Google for Fluency Tutor Chrome extension, go straight to the Chrome store and just add this extension. So let me explain the difference. This extension only allows you to do one thing. It allows you to visit a web page or be on a Google Doc or on a deck and press that extension button, and that'll take all the content that you have right in that Chrome tab and it'll turn it into a reading passage. I'll show you that in action. So do those 2 things for me if you want to play with Fluency Tutor after tonight, and you'll have everything you need to get up and running. And as I said earlier, don't forget it's integrated with Google Classroom. So when I go through the flow here tonight is that how you use this and how you can benefit your students with it. You'll see that I've chosen tonight to use Google Classroom. I've already synced my classes into it. And then I'm just going to share my content directly with my class. So it makes it easy. It'll automatically create an assignment and it'll give you that return workflow that you need to mark and assess that work. So enough talking about slides and more hands-on so we can see exactly what this Fluency Tutor thing does. Now, first of all, I'm going to stay in what I'm going to call teacher view. And then in sort of 15 minutes from now, I'm going to move into student view and then we'll go back to teacher view. So I want to show you both sides of this. What does the student see? Because sometimes we miss out what the student actually experiences and how they get supported in these things. So I'm going to show you both. So I'll stick with this just for the moment and I'll go to this page. And this is fluency.texthelp.com. So I haven't even needed to install an extension. And you know what? If I've forgotten to install the extension, I can install it directly from this window. So we don't need to worry about it. But the short version is right here. It doesn't look like much. It looks like my classes. But basically all I've done here is I've been able to import all of my Google classes. Now I could select the ones that are of most use within this. But this allows me to compare all of my classes right here. Okay. So you can see here that I can go through and I can start. I need to resync my Google Classroom there. So let's resync my Google Classroom and show you pulling all those in. It'll ask me this one time to enable my credentials. So I'm going to go and I'm going to give it permission. And it's going to pull these classes in. And I'm going to say I actually only want those classes pulled in right now. And I'll update the class rosters. And it's going to go through and it's going to update all my classes. So this is me importing all the rosters and enabling all my students to get access to the content that I'm going to share with them. So this will go through in just a few minutes and this will sync everything up. Now, the advantage of doing this is obviously that I don't have to bother importing students as I go. But what I can do then is very easily compare and contrast classes throughout. So I can look at 2 classes and I can see how they're reading. So if you're teaching 2 classes at the same age, it's very easy to compare that particular reading piece. So I'll let that work in the background as we go through, and that will import my classes as we go. And I'm going to go through to share a passage. So sharing a passage, in the first way that we can do it, is just about what you see directly on screen here. So sharing a passage will build in and look for the 500 different pieces of text that I've included within this. So I have a list. This is just alphabetical order right now. But what I could do is I could set this in Lexile level order. Okay, so I could set it from most complex to least complex in terms of Lexile level. I could set it in reading age order. I could set it in word count order, so I know how long those passages are. And I'm going to just make reference to one quick thing here, which is useful to know when we go through the rest of our session. You'll see two wee icons here. One is Fluency Tutor. That means it comes with Fluency Tutor. And the other one here is effectively user generated. So if it's purple, a user has made it. That's really handy because you'll see me start to create content from things like Google Docs that I'm going to send out as a reading passage. And when I do that, I can set it to share it with my colleagues, so the other teachers in my school. It means that as a school, I can build a bank of reading resources that I know are age appropriate and are workable for perhaps my region or my cultural inclusion or whatever I want to include directly within there, so I can do that. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to have a look directly through all of these pieces. So I can say, right, the power of wind, okay? And there's a piece. I know the lexile level is high. I know the reading age is 14, so it's a more complex piece, and I can see the word count there. So it's about 400 words. So I can preview this, and I can see what are my students going to see here, okay? So there are narrative pieces within this. There are factual pieces. There are curriculum map pieces, a huge range that we can pick from. And they're all tagged, so you can search for particular topic areas within those 500 pieces. But you'll see here, that's all the students are going to get. They're just going to get a passage text. So this is the text. They're going to get a prompt image, and they're going to get comprehension questions. So I'm going to go to comprehension questions here, and you'll see we've created through a lot of research comprehension questions. So the students are going to get asked these questions. You can see they're marked as the correct questions are marked. So we're going to automatically mark the comprehension questions right there. Now, I want to show you one quick thing a lot of people ask me about, and it's this. If you're creating a passage and you want to share that with your students, do you have to share it with comprehension questions, or you just want them to do a quick read? Well, no, you don't have to do that. So there's two things that you need to know here in this little options piece. And the things are, do you want them to set the comprehension to answer the comprehension questions? Or do you want them to do a cold read with no support tools? And those are the things that you might want to set a standard, and you can set those for every passage you send out. So I'm just going to leave it here that I want my students to answer the comprehension questions, and I'm going to keep the support tools on. And the other thing that you might notice here is that I can set a standard for all of my classes, the voice that I want them to hear when they have it read back. So if they need support, they can have things read back. So I can change the voice here. I've got nearly 90 voices. So I can do some regional US, regional European voices and accents to suit my particular region. I can even do regions across the UK if you're joining us from the UK tonight as well. I can also set a translation language. So I can set a number of these different languages right here. So there's over 60 of these. So you can set the default translation language depending on the demographic that's in your class. You might want it defaulted to Spanish or German or Italian or Portuguese or Arabic. Any language at all is the default translation language. And that just means that when they come across a word in English that they're unfamiliar with, they can get some help in perhaps their own mother tongue or first language. So I'm going to leave it at Spanish, and I'm going to confirm it. Okay, and what I want to do now, and hopefully at this time we have synced up our Google classes, I'm going to share this through Google Classroom. So remember, all I've done, I've picked the comprehension piece and I just want to share it. So whilst I've done lots of talking there, all I've really done is clicked on a passage, went, that's the one I want, and now I can share it through Google Classroom. So I can press this here and I can share through Google Classroom. So I'm going to say, right, I'm going to share it to my Fluency Tutor class. So you're all familiar with this type of dialogue. What class do I want to share it to? What students do I want to share it to? I'm going to share it with me at this point. I could just select all and share it with my whole class. But the reason we do it this way is you might want to use this as some targeted interventions or some targeted support for particular students. So you could tip a number of students there. And all I press here is create assignment. And what that should do in the background is that will automatically go, it'll create the piece, it will create a brand new assignment in Google Classroom. It'll notify the students as you would if you created a regular assignment. I haven't had to go near the Google Classroom window. I haven't had to attach any files. I've sent that directly out to the student there. So that's a really easy way to get my passage to my student. Okay, I'm going to come back in a little second and I'm going to show you how I can create different content right here. But what I'm going to do is, Darren, I'm just going to stop this screen sharing and I'm going to move to my student view. So if you could reshare, I'm going to stop this one now and I'm going to go right to my student view right here. So let's just see. Let me just see. So let's go to this one, Fluency Tutor. So there we go. So there we go. Thanks, Darren. So this is my Fluency Tutor class. So this is me as a student, not as a teacher. So this is me as a student, not as a teacher. So this is my class window. So remember that what we did was we had automatically created an assignment, just picked the comprehension piece, and now we've picked the assignment. So you'll see here that in my window here, my classroom stream, I already have this piece assigned to me. So I can click on this. Okay, and now what I can do is you'll see here, I have my title here, I have my piece here, it links directly to the Fluency Tutor page, and I can click it, and I'm going to go directly to that Fluency Tutor piece. Okay, I've just clicked it in my classroom window, and now I have the reading piece ahead of me. Now it's going to tell me a few things here as a student. It's going to tell me that actually it's quite difficult text here. It's going to give me access to the support features. So let's say I want to read this, and maybe I read it into myself before I read it out loud, and I come across some words that I'm not sure of. So for example, here's the word fossil. I need some help with that. And you'll see this in Reading Right. So we use this tool here as well. I can get a dictionary definition of the word fossil. That definition is definitely me, someone whose style is out of fashion. We'll go with the second one here. Okay, so there's fossil. There's also a picture dictionary right here. Okay, and it'll give me a picture reference for that word. So if you've used Reading Right before, you will have seen these types of features. So we give those features to the students so they can do a practice read before they record themselves reading it. And also we do things like translation. So if you think about translation, you'll now see that I have access to this. Remember I said it's Spanish. So if Spanish happened to be my first language, or perhaps it's a language I'm learning and I want some help there as well, this gives me that translation. Okay. Now, what else do we have for supports? We have the ability to read text aloud.
Most of the energy we use today comes from fossil fuels such as coal.
So I can now, as a student, get that modeled and I can listen to it and I can have it read out loud. Okay, so that's nice and easy. I've now got the modeling I need. I've got the support tools I need. But what we might need to do here as we go through, maybe we'll need some help with some other questions. So I'm going to say, right, well, actually, I need help. I'm not 100% sure what wind is. I'm not quite sure what we'll see, here's a turbine. Okay, so I'll go to turbine. I need some info on turbine. Maybe I need some info on what a windmill actually is here. So I'll get these definitions as I go. Now, these are important because me as a student, I'm independently going through this and checking this piece of reading work before I even read it to hopefully help me. Or maybe I'll do it after the fact, but I may well check individual words. You can find out what words a student has actually found out, has looked some additional information on, and you can create a vocabulary tool reference for them, and I'll show you that in a second when we go back to teacher view. So we've just clicked it in Google Classroom. Our piece is in front of us. We're able to get modeling, translation, picture dictionary. So all that's left now to do is to record ourselves. Okay, so we can record ourselves. So as a student, I can hit the record button and it's going to wait to start. Now it may well ask me for permission to use my microphone. It doesn't, so we'll go start recording. Most of the energy we use today comes from fossil fuels such as coal, gas, and oil. However, these fossil fuels are non-resources. Okay, now obviously I'm reading that in a protracted way for the demo, but I'm going to show you why I do that when I get back to the teacher piece, because an important part is if a pupil wants to be able to improve, we need to be able to provide good feedback. Now, of course, what a pupil can do now is play this back. So we'll go start recording. Most of the energy we use today comes from So I'm going into my head as a student, right? I have read that out loud. I'm not very happy with that. I want to do it again. I want to improve. So as a student, I can keep pressing the record button and listen to it back until I'm going, okay, I've done my absolute finest work there, and I'm going to submit it to the teacher. Now, a really useful thing here is that when you're a teacher, okay, and we'll do it again to show you exactly what we can do here. So I'm going to press start recording. Most of the energy used today comes from fossil fuels such as coal, gas, and petrol. Okay, so I'm going to throw a couple of misnomers in there, but I'm going, right, I'm ready to send that. I'm happy with that as a student. Now, when you get this back, you'll be able to listen to each individual recording that the pupil has actually created. So you can actually see their progress through time and what they struggle with and what they got better at. So you do have that track record. But all I need to do, I'm just a student. All I need to do now is say I'm finished. And your teacher has asked you to complete a few quick questions on the passage you've just read. When you're ready, click the button below to begin. Okay, so I'm going to click the button to begin as a student. What is the meaning of exhausted as it is used in the passage? Okay, so I'm going to say, I don't know if this is right. I'm going to say, released into the air. Now, hopefully, if I've read it and I've spent time on it, I'm going to get these comprehension questions. Okay, I'm not even going to read the question here, guys. I'm just going to go through and do this really quickly. Okay, so here we go. So now it's saving all my hard work. And guess what it's done? It's sent it directly back to the teacher iView. And now the teacher has that passage. She's been notified that that's ready to go. And I can see all of the pieces that I've returned. And I could also see what my scoring is. So if I'm a student, I could go in and I could go into this piece that I submitted way back in January. And I could go in and I could see my score in that. So I can see here the actual score that my teacher has given me. I can see here some individual feedback that they have provided to me. If I want to jump into my score, I can go right into the document right here, and I can start to see the feedback that I've got. So, for example, I can see here that my teacher has marked this as there was a bit of a hesitation. I was pausing too long when I read that word. If I go here, I can see here insertion. I added a word that's not in the text. So this is the type of feedback I can get. And if I reviewed my score or I just listened to it played back, I might want to just try reading it again. So independently, I can go and I can read that again. So it's a really good tool to provide strong feedback and also to encourage students to read more. But what else encourages students to read more is perhaps to build on their interests. So I said at the outset, there's fluency.texthelp.com, and then I also said that there's the share extension. So the share extension comes into its own, I think, for a student. And for a student who you want to encourage them to be independent about their reading and to record pieces that are of genuine interest to them. So I could get a student here. Perhaps I get a student who's studying Spanish here, and I want to get the student to read through BBC News Mundo, and I want them to read and find a Spanish passage, and I want them to practice their reading out loud for Spanish. So I've read this page. I'm the student. I can see this. This is great. It's interesting for me, the nerd. I'm all about space. So it's interesting on one side and it's interesting on another because it's in Spanish, and it's going to help me with building my vocabulary, hopefully. So I've read this. How would we get them to read it out loud? Well, all we do is this extension right here, Read with Fluency Tutor. I just click this button. And what that does automatically is that pulls that into Fluency Tutor for your student. It turns it into an article that they can practice reading out loud. They can get access to the different range of voices, so they can actually have this read in Spanish or whatever the language is they're using, so they can get a model of the voice and they could start to read it out loud. So I'll press record and start recording. And the problem that I have is that I do not have any Spanish whatsoever. It's always a bad choice for me to pick a Spanish text, but it's always a very useful choice. So let's pretend I'm reading this out loud at this stage. So I'm going to press stop recording. I'm happy that I've read that back out loud. I may have done it a few times. I'm going to press I'm finished, and I'm going to send that back. So now I've got this record of all of the pieces that I've sent back to my teacher. I can see that none of these have been marked yet, but I can listen to them back if I want. Now, here's another way we could do this. Perhaps you've set a task. Your students are reading of Mice and Men. You've asked them to write a piece about the relationship between George and Lenny in Mice and Men. So a fairly complex piece, a fairly heavy piece. This could obviously be a narrative piece. It could be a piece of poetry. It could be anything from any level of writing at all. But perhaps you've just assigned this to be an essay. So they're writing it in Google Docs. You're asking them to submit it directly back to you. That's great. They're going to submit this back to you as they normally would do as a piece of work. What about an extension activity? We want you to practice reading aloud. Now, there's two things that can help with. One, it will help support the reading fluency. But two, what it's also going to do is actually, without actually them being aware of it, it's going to help them actually proofread that passage. So how do they do that? In a Google Doc, so they've written the Google Doc, all we do, up to the extension, press the extension button, and you'll guess exactly what it does. It takes all of the text, it takes the title, it takes the body of the text, it puts it directly into Fluency Tutor, it makes it into a practice reading aloud passage, and then it allows us to record this piece. So I'll record it quickly. The story of Mice and Men focuses on the beautiful and complex relationship of George Milton and Lenny Small. Let's try that one more time. The story of Mice and Men. Oh, there's an error there. I might need to read that again. The story of Mice and Men focuses on the beautiful and complex relationship of George Milton and Lenny Small. Now, you'll notice when I was reading it, I automatically discovered that typo on the third word there. Should have been off. I probably should have capitalized that. I may well have noticed it if I read it more, but I find this useful not only to improve oral fluency and encourage practice reading, but also to help proofread work as a default extension exercise. And remember, all we've got to do is encourage the student to press that extension button when they're in their Google Doc. So let's assume we're finished that, we're happy with it. I'm going to say I'm finished, and I'm going to send it back. Okay. So now I have just submitted The Power of Wind, the piece that my teacher had sent me. I have created a reading piece from a web page, which I've recorded in Spanish, and the writing piece that I was set in English in and around of Mice and Men. I've read that back and I've submitted that as a recording. Two of those I have done myself as a student and have done so independently as part of independent tasks. So it gives students the capability to do that. And that's all students need to see here, okay? They're able to see within this window, linked from Google Classroom, how they're progressing, how they did in the comprehension questions, and how they did in the assessment. So I'm just going to unshare the student view, and I'm going to go back to the teacher view just to finish off through the experience. So I'm going to stop sharing this one, and I'm going to go through right here. We'll see. 2 seconds, and we'll share this back again. So I'm going to just go back to the original view that we started off with right here, which is the teacher view. So remember, what we've done now is the first part, we were just able to share a comprehension question. The second part was our student going, I'm going to read this aloud. And we went through lots of stuff there, but remember just how simple that was. You press a button in the comprehension to share at the classroom. Student receives a notification, opens and reads it back. Now, what I can see here is that the recent things that I have shared are right here in this window. So I'm able to see all of the recent pieces that I shared. So there you'll see the share that I sent out to my one student, Patrick, brilliant student that he is, but you'll see there that I sent this piece out. You'll see here that I haven't marked it. Okay, but what you'll also see here is that my student here looked up 4 different words whenever he read that piece: fossil, turbine, wind, windmills. Remember I did that? It logs it. I'll see here that he wanted 1 word translated. I'll see here that he needed a picture reference for 1 word. Now, here's a really useful tool. See, anything in green in Fluency Shooter, it always works magic. I always find this. So there is a ability to create a vocabulary list. So imagine your student, right? Your student you now know that he struggled with those 4 words or he needed some additional help. How could you help him out a bit more as an extension activity? Just press the vocabulary button right there. And see that vocabulary button? If you're used to read and write, you'll know about this feature. It's in read and write. But what this does is it takes each of the words that my student had struggled with and it pops them into this vocabulary table. Okay, there's your nice Fluency Tutor logo. So what I could do here is I could share this as normal. It's just a Google document directly with my student. My student now has a vocabulary reference table. Or I could build in extension activities into this. Really easy to do. Just press that green button and you're good to go. Now, if I wanted to mark this piece of work, okay, there's a couple of things I could do here. Okay, I could just listen to this. And I could listen to this really quickly by pressing this button. Most of the energy used today comes from fossil fuels. So I've listened to that. I'm like, not sure. Maybe I need to go in. That sounds quite fluent. The objective was to get Patrick to read this out loud. I'm happy with that. Maybe I want to assess it. If I'm happy with it, all I might need to do is press the thumbs up button. Patrick gets a notification. Teachers recognize this, is happy with the piece, move on. If I want to score it, I can go and I can press score this passage. Okay. So there's a whole scoring window comes up now. So we could do that first part, which was just give them the thumbs up, have a quick listen to it or listen to all of it and give some very instant feedback, or I can give them some very detailed feedback. Now, there's a couple of things happen here. You see here, I can listen to the different recordings that Patrick made. So I can listen to the latest recording, the one he actually submitted, or I could listen to earlier drafts. If I want to listen to it, most of the energy used today comes from, okay. Now, what's interesting about this in terms of marking is this will go at the speed that you mark. All right. So if I go right the way back to the start, you see these tabs here. This will allow me to mark each word and part of the reading in a particular way. Okay, so I'm going to go here and I'm going to say right here, I know here that actually there was a hesitation there just at the outset. Most of the energy used today comes from, and on that word energy, I think there was a bit of a self-correction on that. Fossil. There was definitely a hesitation on fossil fuels such as coal, gas. There was definitely hesitation on gas. Okay. And when he got to the last word, I'll say he did a substitution there. So throughout that, I can start to very quickly mark this piece of work. Now, I can use this in one of two ways. I can mark it up so my student gets really rich feedback and they can improve and they can resubmit it. Or I could simply use this in the background to just see how my student is progressing as I send them multiple read aloud passages. So that's used in a number of different ways. So you'll see down here, all these areas here are areas that have been calculated by Fluency Tutor. So what's the error rate? How fast are they reading? It's Patrick McGrath here from Ireland. So that will always be fast because that's what we do when we're in Ireland. But that will automatically measure the speed of reading there, which is a great indicator of fluency in general. And then offset that with the errors you've seen. So let's say we've been through it all. Okay, we've scored it because that's what we wanted to do for this particular piece. And remember, we could have just given the thumbs up and listened to it and we'll move on to the next passage and the next student. We could save the scoring, but it asks us for one kind of list of final things here. And what it asks us for is to rate the expression. It asks us to rate things in a number of different areas. Little expression, some expression, natural language. I'll say Patrick did that with natural language. I'll also say that phrasing, 2 and 3 word mixture of run-ons. Absolutely. Pauses for breath and some choppiness. I think that's a fair description of me presenting a webinar. So I'll go to next and we'll say there were several rough spots in that. And I go to next. And the last one I do is have a look directly at pace. So I think here Patrick had an uneven mixture of fast and slow reading. Now, what is actually the point in doing this? I could give them some stuff. Good work. Watch. Speed. Okay, let me just correct that. So that's my personal feedback and that's my scoring back to my student. Okay, so you'll see there in this case, that because I've marked it in depth, it's told me that this passage was better than the last passage that Patrick read. So I know that there's a little bit of progression going on there. And the advantage of the progression bit, if we chose to mark it in some detail, we can go to our students and we can start to see our students within this. So if I go to view students within my class, I can start to see the averages of all of my students, the total number of pieces that they've read. And what I like about this is if we simply set Fluency Tutor up and we encourage students to read aloud, and all we actually use is that quick, I've listened to some work coming back from Alison, I've given her a thumbs up, we can start to track the actual volume of reading they're doing without even going into that much deeper assessment that you looked at further. If you want to track in the assessments, we can go into assessments here and we can see all of the assessments right there. It's going to take a little while probably to load all of the assessments that we've done. So we've got that. There's everything that's read. There's Alan's been a busy bee over January. He's read 3 passages. We can also see scores. I can also see what is left to score. Remember what I could do. Alan has finished reading Amelia Earhart. I haven't scored it. I'm just going to give him a quick thumbs up there and listen to it. And we're good to go. Okay. So I have the ability to just track how much they're reading, how many passages they've been reading independently, and give them a quick thumbs up on that, or dive down deep into that. Now, just to start to wrap up here, in terms of the content that we might want to give to students, I much prefer that Fluency Tutor is used as an independent tool where we encourage our pupils and our students to pick web pages, to pick Google documents of pieces that they've written, of pieces that they've found online, of worksheets, any piece and literacy piece we can get them to read that builds on their interest and knowledge, to me, is much more useful than anything I'm necessarily going to set them. But of course, there's a time when I need to set them prescribed reading passages. I need to encourage them to read passages that are tied to my curriculum. So how could I do that? Well, you saw before, I can do that by sharing a passage. Okay, 500 passages, good to go. But I could also use the same tools that my students use. So for example, I could go in, let's say I'm a Spanish teacher. This is a Spanish piece of practice. Okay, so this is, I think this is the solar system. So this one, I could turn into a reading passage because I want students to improve their Spanish. How could I do that? I just open the Google document. I just hit the share with Fluency Tutor extension that you've seen in the top right-hand side. The images are added in there all the way through. And all I would have to do here is, as an example, I could say, this is a Spanish piece. So I want to support the Spanish read back so they can have it modeled. And we'll say, yes, I want Spanish Monica to read that back. So the Spanish voice is what they're going to get. And I'll say here that this is L-C-I-E-L-O. Okay, so that's my title. And all I need to do here is go all the way down to the bottom. And I just need to click share with Google Classroom. And just like I did before, pick the class, pick the student, create the assignment, done. It's out to the class. Okay, so I'll cancel this out because we don't want to share even more content to our class. And what I'm going to do here is show you another thing that we could do, which is we could share this Google document because we know this is a reading piece we want to share with students. And remember, they'll just get this notification in Google Classroom. They'll open it up, practice reading aloud, they'll submit it back. You know they've done it because you can have a quick preview and you'll get a notification that it's been sent back. You can also do this from a web page. So again, I said I was somewhat of a spaceman. So anything that happens with space, I tend to find it interesting. That's what I tend to build on in terms of interest. So I'm going to look at this particular piece and I'm going to say, in this case, this is something that's topical and it's relevant to my students, to either a current affairs piece or to a story starter or to a background piece for a piece of curriculum work, or perhaps it's core to a piece of curriculum work. I want them to practice reading this out loud. What could I get them to do? Very simply, I'm on the web page. I go to the extension, top right-hand corner. I press the icon and right here, it's now taken the images. It's simplified it. It's removed all of the nonsense that was around that page, the adverts, everything else. It's turned it into a read aloud web page. It's going to detect that it's English. It's going to read it in English. It's going to give them access to all these tools. And now all I would need to do, remember, is go down here, press classroom, and I go through my usual process, and that creates the assignment. So I want you just to stop and think just for 1 minute. All I've had to do is I've landed on a web page. This would be brilliant to share this and get my class to read this back and improve their reading skills. How will I do that? I just press the extension. I then press the Google Classroom icon. I pick my class and my student, and boom, it's sent out as an assignment. It's a really fast way to get image and relevant content out. I can do it from a Google Doc. I can do it directly from a web page. As long as I'm in Chrome, I can share anything that's in front of me right now. So that gives us the kind of the full overview, I suppose, now on Fluency Tutor. There's lots in what I just said. I totally understand that. And there's lots of information there, specifically and especially on a Friday. There's lots of information there. But I want you to think about it in its very basic terms. We can have built-in content. We can use Google Docs. We can use web pages. And in just a couple of clicks, we can share that as a reading passage with our student. They'll get notified. They can open it up. They get support, and they can submit it directly back. I'm going to answer one question, which everybody asks me at the end of these sessions, just in case you were thinking about it. Don't want to preempt any questions, but the question I always get asked is, for things like the web pages or the Google Docs, can you create your own comprehension questions? The answer is no, unfortunately, you can't. And the reason is that that's designed as a very quick way to get reading content out there rather than some detailed knowledge on passages. We're looking at that right now, and we'll respond to the community if there's community requirements for that. We're absolutely looking at how we can support you guys and your students better with Fluency Tutor as we go forward. Loads of things you can do, which we'll not have time to go into, but I can track all the assessments. I can go into each student. I can get a graph of their progress. I can compare student to student or class to class. There's lots of data behind this, but I didn't want to overwhelm you tonight by going through all of that info. But do click on fluency.texthelp.com and sign up for Fluency Tutor. You'll get full access to it for the next 30 days. And again, if you're an innovator or a trainer, watch out for that announcement coming early next week. I'll make sure we get that to you. So quick reminder as we go through, fluency.texthelp.com. You can get the other two products that we talk about loads, Reading, Writing, and Equatio, text.help/FFT. So you can have those today as well. Get access to it. I'll remind you that all of the resources that we have, these are, I call them informal resources because they're not on a fancy corporate web page. They're not full of corporate messaging. All they are wakelets. And I think this is one of the best, most flexible platforms out there right now to get you guys what you need. So there's a training video for you and there's a training video for your students on something like Fluency Tutor. So there's loads of information there that you can get on all of the extensions that we'll be going through this week. There's one for parents, there's one for students, and there's one for teachers. So you can get access to videos, quick start guides, and one of my very favorite things is on there, which is access to the thing links. And I've talked for 45 minutes now at this stage. Lots of information there with this extension and the web app. And if you want to kind of take a step back and say, whoa, I need to go through this much more slowly and in depth, and I want to try it myself, go ahead and visit our thing link page, and you'll be able to get access to interactive thing links for all of the tools that we've been going through this week. The Fluency Tutor one, I think, is particularly useful there because it's a big interface. When it's a web app and an extension, there's lots to explore on that, and you'll be able to click on each individual button and go through the entire workflow and what students see and what teachers see, and you'll see it from both sides. So do visit that link, and hopefully Darren's been able to pop that one in the chat. Fortunately, we don't have a short link for that one, but do pop to our thing link, and you can explore and have read aloud all of the features of Fluency Tutor. And that is me tonight. That I always knew Fluency Tutor was going to be our absolutely earliest one there. I'm going to pop my details on the screen here. Please give me a follow on Twitter if you get a chance, where you get access to lots of those resources, or drop me an email by all means. And all I want to do is thank all of you that have watched online and offline over the course of this week. I have really enjoyed this week. It's been a busy week. I hope you're not bored of me quite yet, because there's one more session to come on Monday with Stephanie and with Darren, led to believe. So we're looking forward to that, and then the announcement for innovators and trainers just to follow that as well, direct to the community. So I just want to thank Global GEG and the UK GEG team for all their support this week. It's been fabulous, and it's been my pleasure to share all of this information, and there's plenty of it, with all of you today. So Darren, thank you very much, and thank you for ever so slickly switching in and out my screens there. Much appreciated in the background.
No problem at all. I should have jumped in really when you were talking about speaking Spanish, because I'm a Spanish teacher. I could have really put you on the spot, but I thought it is Friday. I won't do.
I thought I'd get my multilingual inadequacies out of the way there at the outset and go, by the way, I don't know why I have a Spanish document up, but actually I tried that also. We do a session on this, Darren, and we do it in Arabic as well. And of course, I don't unfortunately have any Arabic to my shame either. So I struggle with that even more than the Spanish, it has to be said. But I should have said that Fluency Tutor will support Arabic and nearly 100 languages there. So we're not worried about just English here. We're worried about every language.
I mean, I've certainly learned loads more there. I'm well aware of Fluency Tutor. I haven't used it extensively myself, but can I just ask a couple of questions that I think possibly might be useful to people? Firstly, the first thought that came into my head was, I, like many other people, are heading back into the classroom next week for the first time this year. And a lot of people are worried about sort of technology then taking a step back and not being as available, because not everyone is one-to-one with a device and so on. But this is perfect for flipped learning and for getting students to do some reading ahead of a lesson, but also for you as the teacher to be able to make sure that they've got that understanding, that comprehension, or you're aware of any misconceptions and you can address those in the lesson and get right down to the basics and the real key information really, really quickly. So I think, this is a really, really good example of how the technology doesn't necessarily have to be used in the classroom to be effective in the classroom.
Yeah, no, totally agree. And that's why, and I should have referenced it there, actually, the vocabulary list, the ability to look down your entire student roster or from a particular class for a piece that you've asked them to read ahead and just hover over, and you'll pick up a trend as a teacher so quick as to the key, some of the new pieces of vocabulary perhaps that we're going to be introduced in that lesson. And you can see those straight away and you go, right, well, I can see that there's a common focus area here on some new concepts, and make good starters very fast as well. So yeah, absolutely. And I think it's always, Darren, it's building on their own interests as well. And whilst, a lot of our team will talk about the 500 built-in comprehensions. For me, that's a bit more of a sales pitch. It's good that they're there, but I think it's so important to build on sort of the individual sort of strengths and interests of a student to encourage them to read. Because, hey, that's the only way we get them to read. We all know that. We can force them as much as we want into the stuff we want them to read, and we all do it. But to get them to practice, and as a Spanish teacher, I'm sure you'll recognize the potential there for a bit of Spanish oral practice reading as well.
Absolutely, not just reading, but speaking and just listening to the fluency of the language and the tone and the rhythm of the language is so important in terms of building confidence, apart from anything else. Totally. And as our ex-colleague of mine who was our librarian used to say, life's too short to read a boring book, and that goes for articles and everything else. If you're not enjoying it, put it down, take it back, get something you are enjoying, and it's just about finding what you enjoy. And I'll be the first to put my hand up and say I don't really enjoy reading sort of fiction and things like that, but I love a biography or an autobiography.
I'm exactly the same. Funny, I had this conversation with my daughter to encourage her to read as well. It was building on that interest thing, and I was like trying to explain to her. She's looking at me very oddly, going, "How on earth can you be interested in biographies, Dad?" I'm like, "No, that's right. You look at our bookshelves. That's what it's full of, because it's important to read what you're interested in." And
absolutely, and it was Bravo 20 that made me realise that. And Andy McNabbs, I got given it, and I'd never read a biography before. Although it wasn't just a biography sort of thing, it really grabbed me. One question about the extension, actually, which I think is really powerful is I noticed that if you're using a website as you did there and you're sharing that to Fluency Tutor, you have also as a teacher got the option to modify the text, haven't you?
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. There's full edit capability. So I could have reduced that down. I could have pulled out, say, some irrelevant images. So I've got the ability to edit that. So as soon as I pull it into that content window, I can edit it any way that suits me. Absolutely.
And so great that it takes out all of the annoying adverts and the cookies and everything else that's trying to sell us all the sorts of things that we've been talking about and our Amazon dots and everything else we've been listening to. So
yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly.
Brilliant.
I know.
Yeah. Fantastic. Listen, thanks ever so much for tonight, Patrick, particularly on a Friday night. And thanks to everyone for joining us. And you're absolutely right. We'll be back on Monday looking at Read and Write, which I think personally is fantastic and has got so many uses. And I'm sure you're going to tell us loads that we haven't even thought of. So really looking forward to that session as well.
Try my best. No problem. Yeah, look forward to it. In the meantime, have a good weekend, Darren, and have a good weekend, everybody else. We all deserve our downtime in these challenging times that we have right now. So please do take a couple of days to yourself, guys, over this weekend.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Patrick. And thanks everyone for joining us. Take care, everyone.
Take care, right?